Thank you so much, Senator. Senator Francis Heyliger, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, colleagues, to the testifiers, to the people of the territory. Quickly, let me see if I could speed through. In regards to the location in Washington, is there a reason why we're spending? Because I'm looking at it more of trying to figure out austerity measures to cut down spending as it relates to the government. Can we deal with more virtual situations as opposed to be spending $60,000 a year? What is the main focus of the office in Washington? Quickly.
So it's housed in a very convenient location with other state governors and a lot of our partners in Washington. It's a convenient location, and it allows us to run a base of operations instead of working out of hotels. When we get there, we can. It gives us a base of operations. We can entertain meetings. We have our own space. It's just a convenience. We do a lot of work in Washington. We'll be there again next week or later this month.
Okay.
So it's just a necessary convenience.
Okay. As it relates to the Commission on Political Status, I know the University of the Virgin Islands had received grants in order to assist with this, and they had already had a program out. Is this in conjunction with them, or this is additional monies that's being spent? And if so, in order to potentially save, would it be okay if the Office of the Governor partners or works with the university under that grant as opposed to have additional funding in their budget for this?
We, so as I understand that grant, I think that grant had more to do with the Constitution. I hope I'm not mistaken on that. We want to focus particularly on political status, not necessarily a constitution. And we don't mind partnering. We're not asking for a large sum of funds because ultimately we think we're going to do this through a community-wide partnership. At some point, we might ask for certain legislative actions to be taken to effectuate what we're trying to do. So ultimately, it has to be a community-wide effort, and that would include the university and anybody else that can lend to the effort.
Time.
We just think that we've ran into enough issues where we think it's timely and relevant. We need to start talking about status.
Okay. Mr. Chair, may I ask my final question?
Go ahead, final question.
Thank you. As it relates to the Office of Gun Violence, have you guys created any kind of benchmarks as to getting to some successful rate? Because through the discussions over the years of trying to get this done, they had an initial amount as to what it would have cost. And I see here in the budget, you guys are still in the process of trying to find someone, etc. Now, what are your benchmarks to make this a success that we should be funding it? Because to be truthful, I was one of those individuals against it being in the office of the governor because I believe that we had adequate things on the books to include organizations that were basically doing the same thing. But since it's there, explain to me how it's going to work and what are your benchmarks for a successful program?
So we had similar concerns initially too as well, Senator, but we had the ability, we were fortunate enough to be able to talk to some folks who have seen it work elsewhere, and we actually were surprised to know there are several individuals within law enforcement that have been trained in this method, and they were able to convince us that it does need to have the power and the clout of the office of the governor in order to be successful and to bring together all of the different factions and elements of the government that would need to be part of this active intervention. When an incident takes place, you need to be able to give priority, whether human services or education or whoever needs to respond to provide support to that family or that community. They need to be able to mobilize very quickly and know that this is a high priority. We haven't developed the KPIs. As a matter of fact, I'll say Commissioner nominee Ray Martinez is heading off this week to meet with some folks in New York, David Kennedy, who runs one of the more successful programs in this space. They'll be having a conversation, and we look forward to working with him as well as the advisory council to build out KPIs to measure whether this is a successful venture or not. We're trying something, and we're not afraid to say that this is a trial. We hope to revisit this in 5 years and be able to say that it was such a success and that we wish we had done this sooner. If we don't see measurable progress, then as Senator Viale alluded to, then we need to start looking at perhaps where we could better utilize those resources. But we do want to give this a fair and honest trial because there's enough testimonials, including in our own law enforcement, to say this is the approach we should be taking.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
Senator.
you, Mr. Chair, for the time.
No problem. Senator Francis Heyliger, I see you there. You may proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon once again to the people of the territory, testifiers, to my colleagues. I want to ask a question. Has GRS identified any other potential investments that could yield a high return to assist them with some of the funding that they need?
No.
Anyone?
No.
So you haven't identified anything. Okay. I know from last term, and I'm not sure if anyone asked this earlier, I know from last term and from questioning here on the Senate floor, there was a piece of legislation that was passed in regards to giving some surplus monies to GRS. And I know when we had asked the OMB director, she had said that they were working on the 2020 allotment that was supposed to be given to you of $5 million. Have you guys received that money as yet?
I think I received $4 million, and they owe me $1 million.
So you got 4 out of the 5 so far. Okay. Well, also in that same piece of legislation, it continued on to say, and this is me from memory, because I remember when it happened here on the Senate floor. It also said that up to $50 million, not to exceed $50 million, if there was a surplus, that those funding would be given to GRS. And that is the current law on the books right now. Have you guys inquired with OMB as it relates to getting some funding out of the surplus as the law currently states?
We inquired of Department of Finance for an accounting of the 2020, and it told us that it'll get back to us. That was before the current commissioner came aboard. I did follow up with the current commissioner. I have not gotten a response as yet, but publicly I heard that it's
so
about 5.
You haven't inquired about the 2021 one as yet? You haven't inquired for that one?
I have not inquired. No, not as yet.
Okay. Well,
just waiting for the year
and the next question, if we are in a situation that because of this current law, potentially you are going to get, I don't know, some couple million of dollars, what kind of impact, let's say 20, 25 million would have on you in regards to helping you with your situation?
Well,
because of this law.
Pull down. We would delay pulling down or withdrawing any monies from the portfolio. And 25 million is only 1 month of payroll. So we'll use that for the payroll.
So
2 minutes.
Well, one of the things you had said earlier is that your budget, your payment was offset by $100.5 million. Is that correct? That's roughly how much you needed that you guys paid out additionally outside of the drawdown?
The deficit is about 150 million. We draw down at least between 120, 130 million, sometimes less.
So I'm trying to understand, because for me, like what my colleagues have said before, I have come to the realization, whether it's because of past mistakes or how this system has been set up, we have to get to a point where it is paid annually and is a part of the government budget. And we have to figure out how to get you guys to a point where, with better investments, those line items of, say, we start off at 100 million, as you continue to invest better annually, that will ultimately reduce, because I think that's the only solution we're at right now. So I'm trying to figure out, when I asked you earlier, have you guys really started to look at other potential investments that could yield higher returns? It's because I'm looking ahead to the future, because I know what we have to do, but I also expect the system to be working and doing their part in looking ahead to the future to make sure that this system stays solvent. Do you understand
Senator, if we
where I'm
receive,
going?
if we receive any substantial funding, obviously the nature of investment would change. We would get back in and diversify the portfolio, and you will get back into equities. But you cannot take that chance now. We have about liquid assets, liquid cash, right now about 385 million. Our benefits and expenses is 285 a year. You cannot take that chance right now to invest in any risky type environment.
Time.
Yes, equities are doing well. However, our
Okay.
investment advisors has warned us against doing that, and the board has adopted that policy.
Okay. May I ask one final question, Mr. Chair?
You may proceed.
Thank you. The last question I want to ask has to do with, in our effort to avoid insolvency, overall, the conversation has been that we have a ridiculously generous retirement system here. I remember we've had testifiers come here on the Senate floor, commissioners, and one of them said this is by far the most generous retirement system they have ever seen in the U.S. With that being said, what are some of the serious things that you think we have to do in order to ultimately fix this problem? Because I know hard decisions are going to have to be made, but we ultimately have to get to a point where people are continuing to get their retirement, but the system doesn't fold. Share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, Senator, I hate to disappoint you, but over the years, we have done reforms, and those reforms are structural reforms. We increased the age of retirement. We increased the age of retirement and the amount of years for the class 3 employees. We increased employee rates. We increased employer rates. So there's no more we did the career averaging with a tier 2. So there's no more we can do structurally. The system needs to be funded with some type of infusion of cash.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for the indulgence, Mr. Chair.